and welcome to Inspector Josh Investigates TV. In Inspector Josh Investigates TV, I take TV shows and I draw out story writing lessons that we can use to grow in our craft. And today, we are studying Cutthroat Kitchen, Season 4, Episode 6, titled I Like My Peppers Pulverized. Now, it may seem very strange to use a reality competition show in order to discuss story writing. After all, these are nonfiction, right? Well, beyond that, we're actually going to look at how these can work. You can learn story writing from all sorts of sources, and reality TV is no exception. So let's jump in. So a lot of times we get stuck in all of these story rules that we need to follow that really have no good basis. We've just decided that this is how it should be. This is what we're supposed to do. These are the rules. This is the lay of the land. If you break these, dun dun dun, you're going to have a bad story. Oh no. Well, who says? And if you don't know who says or why they said it, then why are you doing it? So we're going to look at a few things that in Cutthroat Kitchen, they do that break the norms of story. And yet somehow people still like the show. Oh my gosh, it's like they're doing something that actually works. So here are some of the rules that you don't need to follow that Cutthroat Kitchen breaks. One of the rules that we can often get stuck in is that stories can only have one main character. Well, who says? Now, I like to have things simplified. So I'm not saying that you need to have a billion main characters. I'm also not saying that you shouldn't have just one main character. But you don't have to have just one main character. And there are a lot of shows that in recent times have flown more into this. Although in a lot of cases, really what they do is there'll be TV shows and the main character will vary from episode to episode, but it's still a valid approach. So when you are creating stories, don't assume, well, what's the main character? Because that's often a question is, what's the main character? Well, it might not be a the, it might be a them instead. And that's totally okay. And it doesn't mean that you have to have, here's the main character. Oh, and all these other characters, they're important, but they're supporters. No, you can have more than one main character. In fact, maybe your big story is about a relationship between two people, in which case, how can you not have two main characters? I could focus it on from one character's perspective or things like that, but don't get locked into thinking you have to have one main character. Do what's best for your story. Ask yourself, why do I think I need to have one main character? Or why do I think I need to have more than one main character? And don't worry about breaking the rules if it's better to break them. Another rule that we don't need to follow that Cutthroat Kitchen also breaks is your main characters all need to last throughout the entire story. Wrong. Now, we have the stories where you have one main character and they die at the end. Oh my gosh. But if you have multiple main characters or your supporting cast, they don't all need to survive to the end. Or alternatively, let's say that one of them dies. They don't need to come back to life. There's no rule saying that. If you think that you should do that you have to, ask yourself why. Is it because you think the audience will be mad? Well, you know what? I don't think that that's always going to be true. There are audience members who will be upset, but also, was it them being heroic? Was it them being a good person? Because actually their death might make us respect them more, and we might actually appreciate them more for having given that sacrifice than without. So, in fact, if people are upset, they might even be upset because seeing that sacrifice, they realize how good of a character it is. Sometimes we don't realize how much we'll miss somebody until they're gone even. So don't assume that just because people won't like it, that means it's a bad move. Think about it from more angles and just ask yourself, why? Why do you think people won't like it? Why do you think that this will be a problem? Why do you think this is going to get in the way? So another rule that you don't need to follow that this reality TV show breaks and somehow does well, in the end, the main characters all need to get along. Nope, that's not true either. Your main characters can hate each other throughout the entire story or for a lot of the story. In fact, I'd say that Watchmen is a pretty good example of that. And you can look at other stories as well that can do this. I think Watchmen's a pretty great example there. But your characters don't all have to get along. In reality TV shows, it's all about people who maybe they get along, but they're against each other, and they're fighting each other for some victory in many cases. Not in all cases, but in many cases. And that's okay. That's totally valid. You're allowed to do that. And let's go on to a fourth rule that you don't need to follow that we often do. Main characters need to leave by choice. If they leave the group, if they go away, it needs to be by their choice. Not necessarily. Maybe the other main characters voted them out. Maybe the other main characters decided, you know what, you shouldn't be here. Now, you could argue that when it comes to reality TV show, well, the only main character is the winner and all the other characters are really just supporting characters and we don't know who the main character is. Well, on the one hand, that's a valid argument, but what do you label somebody as a main character for? Is it for your own sake in determining whether or not they should be there? Is it in the amount of dialogue they get? Isn't it about how you present the story? Isn't that kind of how you choose a main character? Isn't it about how you present it? Because really, from a story perspective, they all have their own big stories. They all have their own things that they're doing. It's not like in your story's world, here's the main character. There might be more popular characters, there might be more famous characters, but in your story's world, there's not really a main character. Everybody's sort of a main character in your story's world. So really, the main character label is just for the sake of writers and audiences. And so if in creating the story and in telling the story, there isn't really a differentiation between one character and another as a main character, at least for a time, then arguably they're both main characters. So quit looking at rules that you don't know why they are there. Instead of looking at those rules and going, I need to follow this, this is a rule. Instead, ask yourself, why is this a rule? Why have I made this a rule? Why have I allowed this to control my writing? And maybe you'll follow it stronger than ever before, but maybe you'll just find a new niche, a new breakage, a new thing that you can do that just tweaks the rules enough to add some new interest, maybe into a dead genre or maybe into a dead format. But you can do something new and cool. And a lot of times this comes with rebellion against the norms that we have no good reason for holding on to. Don't be afraid to ask why. And I strongly recommend for everything that you do, if you don't know why you do it, ask yourself, why do I do this? Why do I use this format? Why do I listen to this podcast? Why is it that Josh advises this? Why? And I can give you reasons for the whys, but you also can figure out some reasons. And if you have another why that for your case makes more sense, if you have another reason for going with something different, don't just stop. Ask yourself why. Ask yourself why, and this will lead to you becoming a more powerful and productive writer. Thanks so much for listening. Tune in for an episode next week of Inspector Josh Investigates TV. If you like this podcast, please give me a like on Podbay, or maybe give me a review on iTunes, or tweet me at Twitter at Josh Paulison. Have a fantastic week, and remember to keep growing in your writing, because you got some sweet ideas, and I want to see them. Take care.